Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our Wednesday webinar. My name is Craig Brown. I serve as the Executive Director of Congregational Development for the California-Nevada Annual Conference of the United Methodist Church. That makes for an interesting mixer when I'm at parties when I have to introduce myself by what I do. It's the longest job title I've ever had in my life. So with that said, I am glad to be with you today. It's a pleasure to have this time together in which we can share every Wednesday about some of the best practices that are emerging in this time in which we are all under stay-at-home orders in the state of Nevada and the state of California. And so how is it that we're community together as an annual conference? How are we connectional people? And that's what this webinar is trying to answer. And we've had 2 Wednesday webinars now in a row. This is our 3rd this week. And so I want to thank everyone for the good feedback you've been giving us on the evaluation forms that we've been sending out to you each week. We have learned a tremendous amount about doing these Wednesday webinars. And so your feedback is incredibly important to us. For our webinar, we use what is called the Zoom webinar interface, which if you have a Zoom meeting, it looks familiar, but it does work a little differently. In the webinar feature of Zoom, you do not see thumbnails of all the different participants who are here. And right now there are over 61 attendees right now. So you don't see all the thumbnails, you only see the video feed of those who are called panelists. And so there are 4 of us on as panelists right now, but you can only see 2 of us. I'm one, and our guest today, Michelle, is the other. And what you'll want to notice in Zoom is down at the bottom, there are some buttons on the bottom of the screen there. One is called chat, and if you hit chat, you can type a message in. The chat window usually will pop up on the right side of the Zoom window. And you'll notice in the bottom right where you type in your message, there's a little pop-up menu. And on that pop-up menu, it defaults to all panelists. If you want to share something in the chat window that everybody can see, you can change that pop-up menu to all panelists and attendees. And when you do that, everyone will see what you post in the chat window, not just those who are the panelists today. Also, there is a place on the bottom there where it says Q&A. That is a place where you can ask your questions, and at the end of Michelle's presentation, there will be time for questions and answers today. And so when we get to that point, I'll invite you to hit that Q&A button if you have a question and type your question in, and we will try to address as many of those questions as we can. I wouldn't worry about putting in a question now. Let's wait till we get closer to the end of Michelle's presentation, and then ask your questions then. We have time set aside for that to happen today. Also want to let you know at the end of our webinar today, we have a special guest who's going to be joining us, but I'm not going to spoil it. I'm going to let the special guest just sit in mystery for a moment. So you'll see a little bit later who our special guest is today, and they'll be coming to us at the end of our webinar. There's one feature I want to show you. One of the things that our communications department, Tua Yang and Selby Ewing, have been really working hard at is getting our conference website set up so that we have kind of an archive of all of the Wednesday webinars. And so I'm going to show that to you very quickly on our website, how you can find each Wednesday webinar. So let me pull that up for you briefly, and I will show you. This is the landing page for our conference website here. And we have put the button for the Wednesday webinars right over here on the right where my cursor is circling right now, my pointer. It says Wednesday webinars. If you click that button, you'll be able to see a listing of all the webinars we have already had. You can see the webinar from 2 weeks ago with Jason Moore about online worship, telling the story in a new time, the old story in a new time. You can see last week's webinar by Diane. This week's webinar, of course, is listed that Michelle is leading us. And then next week's webinar coming up is how to address stewardship in online gatherings for pastors and leaders in churches. And so what I want to show you here is if you click on one of the webinars that have happened in the past, you'll notice if I click on it, this is the page about the Jason Moore presentation. Here's some information about it. And then over here on the right where it says quick links, that's the important place for you to be looking, quick links. You'll notice there's one for the webinar recording of the video, so you can watch the webinar again. You can play the webinar for your team at your church or wherever you're at so people can watch it. And then if the presenter had a deliverable like a PowerPoint or a handout or something like that, we'll include the links for that right there on the right under quick links. So that's, for example, the one with Jason Moore. Last week, Diane Knudsen was with us, and she talked about the CARES Act and the payroll protection program. Same thing. We have over here on the right in the quick links a recording of that webinar and the PowerPoint that Diane used last week. So it's really easy to find where this page is. Remember, just go to the conference website on the landing page, cnumc.org. Over on the right, you'll see Wednesday webinar, and click it and you'll see a listing of the webinar. And that's also where you can register for the webinar as well. So for example, next week, we're going to be having a webinar about stewardship and online gatherings. If I click that, we'll have the registration open for that soon. You'll see that right over here on the right where you can register for that webinar next week. So we're looking forward to bringing that to you then. So that's where you can find it. If you have any questions, please reach out to me or to our Director of Communications, Selby, who you'll hear from at the end of the webinar. She can help you find that. Well, now it's time to turn to our presenter for today. We are thrilled that we are able to have our conference lay leader, Michelle Pope, lead us today. Michelle, in addition to her responsibilities as the conference lay leader, she does have a day job, believe it or not. And her day job is the CEO and Executive Director of the Alzheimer's Services of the East Bay. And they provide a tremendous amount of services to those who, in this time of the COVID-19, are some of the most vulnerable people that we have within our world. And so Michelle has been engaged in leading that work in a significant way in the Bay Area and has been doing that for a good number of years. Michelle also has a weekly podcast that you may want to try and tune into using your favorite podcast app. And the name of her podcast is Life is a Sacred Journey. Life is a Sacred Journey. So I hope whatever app you use for podcast, you'll tune in and hear Michelle as she offers some of her thoughts and interviews with individuals that really can help us understand better what it means for life to be a sacred journey. We're excited to have Michelle with us. I'm going to turn things over to her now. You'll see my video disappear and hers appear. And so welcome, Michelle. We're going to give you some virtual applause and that we are glad that you are with us. Please lead us.
Thank you, Craig, and thank you to all of my brothers and sisters from the Cal Nevada Conference for joining us this afternoon for what I hope will be informative for you and that you can use in your day-to-day mission and ministry work. I, as the CEO, Executive Director for Alzheimer's Services of the East Bay, have been in a time of learning how to use social media to not only stay in contact with my teams of nurses and social workers that are still serving individuals throughout Alameda County, but also with the CDC, the World Health Organization, with the county, with our governor, with everyone. These are meetings that I'm normally used to having face-to-face. And I'm sure you're all experiencing that as well. Technology is not my thing. It is not something that I know much about. I mean, even just now as we were testing, sharing the screen and how to share the screen and how to ensure that people are engaged and involved is so difficult when you're trying to facilitate a meeting and trying to get work done. So we're going to talk a little bit about how you can go about doing those things. I want to also talk about during this time, how we can still continue to grow in relationship, how we can still come together as clergy and laity to partner. This is a great time. I know that sheltering in place for some does not mean that you're just home hanging out, that you're still working, you're still having Zoom meetings. But what a great opportunity for us as laity and clergy to build upon our relationships. I know that the bishop and I are working on that. She and I make time every Friday to connect with one another, not just about the business of the conference, but to connect. And I want to talk a little bit about that, how that connection helps us to build trust with each other, how that connection helps us to feel a sense of comfort during this time of COVID-19. So let's get into it, get a good seat, and we'll get right into it. So I am caught up in a swirl of conversations, a swirl of meetings. I found, and I'm going to share my screen with you in a few minutes because I found this incredible picture that I thought it would really show how I'm feeling right now. And I'm sure how many of you as clergy are feeling, trying to connect with all of your laity, trying to make sure that the business of the church is still happening with ad council meetings and finance meetings and worship teams having to meet to figure out how to do that worship service, whether it be on Sunday or whether this last week for Holy Week, we had a variety of different services and, worships going on. So as we look at, and I'm getting ready to share my screen with you, as we begin to understand that and really understand how that affects the way we work with each other. I have found, and my daughter is a millennial, so she's much better with it than I, that texting and sending emails and all of those things are not foreign to her. She could text a person in a minute. I've called her sometimes and called her 5 times. But if I text her, she answers me immediately. If I call her and leave 5 messages, I don't hear from her. So texting has become a way of communicating, and she's reminded me that a text is a short message. My texting goes on and on to like it's an email, and she's reminded me that texting is really just a quick check-in to say, I sent you an email, I'm gonna call you later, can you pick up the phone and call me? It's not to fill up the whole little text bubble with a whole lot of information. So that was a lesson that I got taught a couple of weeks ago when I was trying to talk with her about something where she said to me, Mom, you're just sending me too much information in a text. So I pass that on to you and share that with you. I'm going to share the screen now as I bring up the snapshot that I'd like to share with you. I think it's really cute, so I wanted to see if we could do this. All right, I hope that everyone is engaged with this slide. It is so funny, when I saw this, I thought about our clergy, and I thought about our clergy being this individual in the middle. I couldn't find one where I could get a male and female, so I apologize for that. But just as a model of, this is our clergy right now. They're in the middle, trying to figure out how to connect with all of us, how to talk to all of us, how do we conduct the business? And then you can see all this vortex of information going around. You can see the time that it takes to do all of this. And then there's fires. There's these fires that are happening in the lives of not just our clergy, but also our laity. So the paper is going. We've got people that want to talk to us. We've got our laptops. We've got our phones. And we still have a variety of work that needs to get done on a day-to-day basis. And how do we do that? Well, when I look at this and when I saw this, I thought, well, this person is all alone. This person doesn't have the group or the team that they need to order to do all of this within the construct of a 24-hour day. And you know, I began about a year ago to realize when we say 24 hours in a day, that's kind of not fair, because people are not supposed to work 24 hours. There has to be time for rest. There has to be time for worship. There has to be time for quiet. And there has to be that space where you're really thinking about, what's the next move? What's the vision that I see? What's the mission that I think is going to happen in my life as a clergy person or a lay person, or just to be silent with the world? That's the one thing during COVID-19 that I have noticed, is how quiet it is. It's very quiet because the campuses are closed. There's no not as many cars on the street. We don't have as many airplanes going overhead. So it's really quiet. But in this quiet is this chaos that we see right here. And in it, nobody is happy. So you can see these folks, nobody's smiling here because nobody feels connected. Where if we are in the same space, We're experiencing, social distancing, which is 6 to 10 feet apart. And how does that feel when you're 6 to 10 feet apart from somebody? And if you're social distancing in your home, as I am with my daughter right down the hall, it just feels so isolating to not be able to walk up to her and touch her. And so we're engaging in very different, very, very, very different ways. And so now we're at this point where we know that this vortex of communication is happening. We know that we're going through this time and we're using our cell phones. We know that things are falling apart because Zoom is also trying to handle all this while we're having Zoom collapses, the internet collapses, and it's frustrating. One of the policies that we just implemented with our Zoom calls, that whenever possible, that everybody is using their video. Why? Because if you're the facilitator of the meeting and you can't see all the people that are in the meeting, there is the big chance that you may not call on somebody, that you may not interact with somebody, as well as during this time of COVID-19, when we're not physically with each other, there's a great sense of comfort to see the face of somebody that is your familiar, to see that person smiling back at you and nodding their head, or even having those moments, which I see happening more and more at the beginning of Zoom meetings. Take time for fellowship. I sign on early for my Zoom meetings as I'm waiting for people to come on board so that we can take that time to have fellowship and to talk to each other and hear how people are doing, and take that moment to be intentional and connectional with everybody that's on the call. I know that our extended cabinet is meeting and the bishop facilitates us through asking the question, how is everybody doing? And sometimes it takes a long time for us to engage with that question. If you're like me, I'm going through COVID insomnia now. I don't know why, but for some reason I'm waking up all hours of the night and having a really hard time resting. And so I'm tired many times when I'm on when I'm on the calls, on these Zoom calls, and it's taking me a minute to process what's being said. And then you get the Zoom call where you see the person's voice move, the person's lips moving, but there's nothing coming through the audio. So there's that delay. And so all of those things we have to take into consideration when we're experiencing Zoom. So we're making use of Zoom. We're doing all these things online, but I wanted to give you some tips that we're using here at Alzheimer's Services of the East Bay to make sure these meetings are fruitful. We're trying to minimize distractions. So that means even though I can bow my head and write on my cell phone and answer a text or an email, that is a no-no in a Zoom meeting. That it shows that you're being distracted. That shows that you're multitasking. And while I know sometimes there are those of us that have to because of the nature of our positioning, but when I'm looking at you and you're not engaging with me, and I feel then a little sense of like, okay, so wait a minute, this meeting's not important. My time is not important. How do I make sure that this person is really acknowledging me and hearing me and seeing me? And so if we could just focus on where we are at the time of that meeting, that Zoom meeting, and not get distracted and minimize those distractions. I know when I have Zoom meetings at home, I have animals running around and I've had to learn to put them somewhere else during the Zoom meeting so that I can remain focused. Set goals and boundaries for the calls, as Craig just modeled for you, really outlining what this meeting is for, what the conversation is going to be about, what the goals and objectives are. hear back from the people that are on the Zoom call to make sure that they understand that that's the reason for the meeting. Ask for any type of input from them that may help you to clarify or fine tune your agenda for that meeting. And always leave a little bit of space in your meeting time to add a new agenda item, because sometimes people will bring up things and that's a great agenda item and that's the time to talk about it, so you don't have to push it aside for another meeting. Ensuring that we make a communication plan. I know Selby and Tua in our communication department have been really seeking time to do that, to create a communication plan that ensures that we're connected. This webinar series is a part of that, and many, many other things that you're going to see coming down the pipeline are to help us to stay connected. I believe that we may be sheltering in place longer than we think. I'm happy to hear that the diagnosis of COVID-19, the numbers are lowering, but again, there's still so many people that have not been tested, so many people that are still not sheltering in place and coming out without masks. We may have another surge of stuff that goes on. So it's so important that we begin to understand this may be a mechanism that we have to use a lot. I know the Lay Leadership Development Committee, we meet via Zoom every single month. And we set a time, we meet at that time, we start on time, we end on time. You can record your meetings on Zoom if you do not have a person that is able to take notes. And I think that's a useful tool as well, particularly if you're the facilitator of the meeting. You can go back and you can listen to that Zoom message and then know, you know, okay, this is what we talked about, this is who I need to follow up with. And it makes life so much easier for you if you can't, you know, take notes or you don't have a note taker. Making sure that that social connection that you get in those meetings, be intentionally, listening. This morning I called one of our lay leaders within the Cal Nevada Conference for no reason at all. I just thought about her and I called her to say hello, to find out how she was doing. And what she said to me that was so important, she said, "It's great to hear your voice." And we email each other all the time. But when she said it was great to hear my voice, and I have to tell you, my little heart was all afluttered to hear her voice. And so I also want to challenge us to take time to pick up the phone. You know, we've started a phone tree where we're calling 7 people every week so that we can, again, engage with one person a week from our congregation that we normally may not even, I pick people that I don't normally even engage with on an ongoing basis to get to know them better during this time of COVID-19. So then when we're back in our architecture, I'll know them better. You know, these are people that attend a different service than I. So picking up the phone and engaging with people in dialogue is so important. The other that I think is so much fun, and I've done this now once a week. Tonight I will be doing it again with my son and my daughter-in-law, is having a virtual dinner. So we have a virtual dinner every Wednesday night. We get together and we cook. I cook on my end, they cook on their end. We're zoomed in with each other, and they are so fantastically happy to be sharing and being with me, and I with them, and we're laughing and going. So virtual dinners are amazing. This is a way where I would pray that clergy and laity leadership would come together now. This is a time when laity leadership and clergy, you have this moment to come together and get strong in your communication and in your relationship and in your partnership. And this is the time to do it. Have that virtual coffee time, have that virtual lunch, have that virtual dinner, and be intentional with it. Have a virtual book study. I'm reading a book right now that I'm hoping that with my small group that we will do a virtual book study to stay engaged with each other, doing a virtual Q&A picking people within your congregation that have expertise in certain areas and maybe doing a virtual Q&A, getting people involved where they normally wouldn't be involved. And so this is really a fun time. Virtual fitness is something that I've seen more and more of. I myself haven't participated, but I'm thinking about it, doing a virtual yoga class. And there's a bunch of them online free now, but staying fit, virtual meditation. There's so much virtual stuff going on that you can pull in to your Zoom meetings, pull into your conversations, where it's the place where you can connect and be intentional. Recently, just this week, we used an application called, and I may pronounce it incorrectly, it's either Miro or Miro, and it's an online collaborative whiteboard. And so we've been able to use that for our meetings so that people can still feel like we're writing on boards and so forth. And so we've been doing all the things that I just outlined to stay engaged and to stay involved. How do we have, though, during this time, some of the courageous conversations that still need to be had? I realized when I was watching all of the worship services that were happening prior to Easter and for the month that we went into shelter in place, and over time, it took us a minute, but it took us a minute to talk about stewardship. It took us a minute to talk about stewardship because that's a courageous conversation that sometimes we're afraid to have. And I think that in a crisis, we start to feel like, well, maybe this is not the time we should talk about tithing. This is not the time that we should talk about our mission and ministry. And I learned from our communications department that we have more people coming online, watching many of our online services than ever before. So that means that there are people hitting our online worship services who may not be Methodists, who may not be Christians, who may not even, who are searching. And in that searching, there's something that's resonating with your worship. And so really outlining the mission and ministry that your church is engaged in and showing it from the perspective of not just clergy-centric, showing that laity are engaged and involved with you and that you're doing it in partnership. I have a friend that was an atheist, no longer an atheist, and when she was an atheist, one of the reasons that she gave was she said, well, everything seems to be about the pastor or the priest or the this or the that within the hierarchy of the church, but all of the worker bees and all the people that come into the church are just there for you to ask them for money. And when she said that to me, of course, I got a little offended because I know that's not true. But if that was her perception, how many other people have that perception? And how many other people are trying to figure out what church is all about? What do we do with that money that we bring into our church buildings on a Sunday basis or whenever it comes in? Are we using it in the communities that we serve? This is a great time to lift up all that community engagement and say, you know what? Yes, we have stewardship, and we are asking all of our church members to continue to their stewardship to the mission and ministry of their churches. We're asking you, if you are a new member watching, a new person watching this online sharing of worship, to donate to any mission or ministry that you see that resonates with you. There's nothing wrong with that. There's so many ways to do that. Venmo, people can write a check, you can do online giving. And if you're feeling confident about that ask, and if you understand that ask is that the money and everything that we receive as Christians is a blessing from God, and then we're just passed through. You know, in the nonprofit world, you can write a grant and then money can be passed through money. Well, that's who we are. We're the pass through. We pass through our blessings so that we can be so that our works, the mission and ministry of Jesus Christ, can be seen within our community and neighborhoods. So don't be afraid to have that courageous conversation. Clergy and laity, this is a time for you to have those backdrop, courageous conversations around the leadership of your churches. I have heard from many laity that as they continue to grow and get more training through many trainings that are happening throughout our conference, that sometimes they come back to the church setting and their pastors are not willing to sit down with them and say, what did you learn? How can we take what you learned and make it a part of what we're doing here within this body, within this context? And it's very important to be able to do that. And that partnership is so important. How do you nurture that partnership? This is the time to do it. The other day, I received a card from our conference, the annual conference lay leader president. She's just sent me a card to say hello. I was so excited to open that card because it was mail. Needless to say, we're hearing that mail is not the way that we communicate a lot these days, but using mail is really important, sending people cards. But this is the time to have the courageous conversations around the differences that were around the table when you last met. Make sure that you're doing it in a place where you're not trying to win. It's not about debate. It's not about your political beliefs. Sometimes it's not even about your social beliefs. There's some things that I believe socially, but that when I'm leading within the conference, I lead for the better good of the conference. And so what does that mean, laity and clergy? How do we come together and make sure that we're leading in a way that shows that partnership? You know, you can't show love and you can't show commitment and you can't show collaboration if you've never done it, if you've never experienced it in that partnership with one another. So my challenge to you is to sit down with your laity, clergy, and laity, hold your clergy accountable in a gentle, loving way, and figure out what your mission, vision, and purpose is. Come up with a mission statement during this time, because it should be different than your mission statement was before COVID-19. I think that you've learned a lot behind the scenes, and what did you learn and how did you do it? A mission statement is something that really glorifies the work that you're going to be doing going forward. A vision statement. What is that vision that we have for each other as a lay person? I know when I meet with our bishop, my vision for her is one, that she gets some rest and that all of these things, and I lift that vision up for her, and then she lifts her vision up for me. Are you doing that, clergy, with your laity? Laity, are you open so that the clergy can do that? Are you guys willing to have those conversations that might break your heart? But boy, when you forgive and you love and you grow from that place, the things that you can accomplish will be magnificent in the name of God. So your mission, vision, and purpose. It's also a time for purpose. What is our purpose as clergy and laity within the California Nevada Conference? Where do we have those intersections? Where do you see us being after we're back out in the world? I hope that we will not go back out into the world the way we went into sheltering in place. I hope that we will be willing to have those conversations where you don't have to find a reason to say, but that's not what I meant. That you're courageous enough to say what you mean and stand by what you mean. And then let's talk about it. Let's pull the onion apart and have that layered conversation that allows us not only to grow in our faith, but helps us to grow as a conference. So I'm going to ask you, I'm going to give you sort of a 90-day timeline. In the next 90 days, can you pray together as clergy and laity in a more intimate way that brings you together, and that you pray together, that you pray without ceasing? Are you willing to increase the amount of time that you spend with each other, the amount of time that you're intentionally listening and not being distracted by other things? Are you willing to engage those individuals that are not holding leadership positions in the pews, and that get them engaged in the process now. This is where a leader, somebody that out there with a spiritual gift that you may not even know they have, that may bubble up and they can help you in ways that you never even could have imagined. I'm sure there's people out there that know how to use the internet and Zoom and put together virtual trainings and all of those kinds of things. This is a time to utilize our gifts, and focus in on our gifts. And then building and collaborating together in a way where we can truly understand who we are, and not be afraid of that, and supporting each other in a way where we can know that everything's going to be all right if we just keep moving in this direction. And so I showed you a bubble picture in the beginning where the clergy person was sitting all alone, and that's not what we're trying to do. And what we're trying to do, clergy and laity, is work together. It's a partnership. It can be sometimes a scary partnership. We have to let our egos, none of us owns the church. I've heard lay people say, this is my church. I've heard clergy say, this is my church. It's not your church. It's not your building. It's not. And so we need to get that dialogue out of our bandwidth so that we can embrace what we're really here to do. And that's to share the light and the love of God, that we can share that we are all living in a time as Easter people, that we are reborn, for a lack of a better way of saying it, during Easter through the crucifixion of Jesus. And in that rebirth, we can come out into the world and engage each other, love each other, and be honorful of the time that we have together. I'm going to share one more slide with you before we end, in the hopes that, I hope I can, in the hopes that you will see the difference in, oh, it went away. So what it was the clergy person in the middle was now surrounded by groups and groups and groups of people. And then all around the circle of that chaos, nobody was alone. Nobody was standing alone trying to be the person making all the decisions and being the leader all by themselves. The true testimony and the true testament of a good leader is a leader that knows that you're giving so that other people can lead. You're a facilitator, and from the one that taught us the best, you are a shepherd. Jesus was one of the best leaders, the best example of leadership. We need to be doing more books around his leadership style. He made sure that he connected. He was intentional. He made sure that he knew something about everybody that he came across. And he shared love, and he shared trust, and he shared openness, and he shared everything with his disciples. And then he said to them, go on and do it too. And let's not get caught up in the things that keep us apart. Structure keeps us apart. And while we need structure, we all have policies and procedures, the book of discipline, we have structure so we don't have chaos within the structure. But when it comes to one-on-one relationships, be mindful that I need you to be truthful. I need you to be intentional. I need you to be engaged. And clergy and laity, we need to be engaged so that the world can see, that being a Christian, being a Methodist means that we work together and that we work hand in hand. One of the things, I'm a hugger. All of you know that I'm a hugger. So now I can't hug anybody. So when I see people, I constantly am doing this to them and just bowing and just letting them all know how humbled I am to be with them, how humbled I am for the time that they're giving me. And so you can use that as a welcome to say hello. You can say goodbye. I've learned a little ASL stuff, so I'm learning how to say "go in peace," or this last Easter I learned how to say "Happy Easter Sunday" in sign language. You can go online and learn it. It's there, and there's great people that can teach you. So in our last minute together, I want to read this Bible verse to you because this is one of my favorite. Go therefore and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit, and teaching them to obey everything that I have commanded you. And remember, I am with you always to the end of the age. And so God is with us. Jesus is with us to the end of the age. Be with each other in worship, ministry, and service. And don't let COVID-19 or virtual worship get in the way. Be joyous. God bless.
All right. Thank you, Michelle, very much for your leadership. If those of you who are here in attending, if you want to type any questions in the Q&A button down at the bottom of the Zoom window, you click that button and you can type in your question, and they pop up on my screen, and then I'm able to answer, or not, I'm able to ask those questions for Michelle, and she's able to respond to that. One question I have, Michelle, that I wanted to ask, you mentioned something at the beginning, that one of the things you do often is you have a time as the conference lay leader to engage with the bishop on a regular basis.
Yes.
And that partnership and that conversation is important. And when I was pastor at San Diego First, I did the same thing with my church council chairperson and lay leaders. I met with them usually for breakfast every other week. So I was meeting with one of them one week and another one the next week, and kind of went through the rotation like that. So we kind of kept our fellowship going. In this time in which we're now having to do all these kinds of meetings on Zoom, how have you been challenged in trying to continue those conversations every week, and how have they actually maybe improved during the week as you've used this platform to do that?
It's interesting. That's a great question, Craig. Timing is always an issue. Both the bishop and I have multiple things going on. And so if we know that we need to change that meeting, we will be super vigilant and changing the meeting, try to keep it on the same day. If we have to change it from that day, we immediately pick another day right away so that we don't lose time. One of the things that she and I both realized is when we weren't having those ongoing meetings because of chaos in our lives and so forth, that connection, while still very solid, it was getting a little wonky. That feeling of, I miss my bishop. I need to connect with my bishop. I need to understand if she knows what I'm doing, and I need to ask questions and so forth. So it's very, very important to keep them. And if you're going to change them, collaboratively pick another date and time to do it. And I think every clergy person and every lay person should really talk about having that, even if we weren't in COVID-19, making sure that you meet and talk to each other on an ongoing basis. You cannot have a relationship with somebody that you don't spend time with.
Yeah, good. So I've got a few questions that have come in so far from folks, and let's see. How do you deal with folks in your congregation that don't have internet? I mean, I heard you talking about using the phone a little bit. Talk a little bit more about some ways that that kind of relationship building can happen.
Yes, I love, a lot of people have, most people have cell phones. And what I realized the other day with some of our laity, even at the church where I attend, and some of my patients, is they don't know how to use their phone. They don't know how to use all the functions on their phone. And so it was a great time for me with one of our seniors in our congregation to get talk, get on the phone with her, figure out what kind of phone she had, and then we laughed for 30 minutes trying to figure out how to use her phone and what functions she had on her phone. And we found out that she could actually download Zoom on her cell phone and still engage. For those folks that don't have that capability, then it's back to the old school, picking up the phone, there was another person that she doesn't see very well. So what I did was actually just get in my car and go ring her doorbell and run back out to the curb. And she and I had a good 15-minute conversation, me at the curb, she at her front door. And she told me the next time I come, she's going to bring me a chair. So you just got to be innovative, and you've got to just think out of that bubble that this mechanism in which we're using for this webinar is the only way that we can communicate. It's not the only way. And as I said, you know, sometimes just sending a person a little note, a letter, is so incredibly wonderful. People love it, and particularly those of our older congregation members who are used to receiving mail and remember the days of the letter.
Cool. Another easy question to answer is, during the presentation, you mentioned this whiteboard app that you're using, and someone's asking if you could mention it again and spell the name of it.
Yes.
So that we had it. That'd be good.
M-I-R-O, Miro or Miro. You know, anybody who knows me knows that I don't pronounce things well at all, but that's what it is. And we used it. We're using it for free right now. They have, and you can pay for it too, but we're using it for free. And they have a great tutorial on there on how to use it. And we found it to be really helpful in a planning meeting where we had to do flow charting and all kinds of timeline things. And so we used it for that. And I think it's going to be worth paying for once we're no longer doing COVID-19.
Yeah. Good. And for those of you listening, you can also use that kind of feature in Zoom. If you click on share screen in Zoom, you'll see a button that says whiteboard. And if you click that, you can use that as a whiteboard to draw something on. Drawing with your mouse is a challenge, but that's another webinar.
Yes.
So
I have one more thing.
Please.
This is something that happened to me today. Please come to the Zoom meeting looking like you're coming to a meeting. One of my employees came to a meeting today and looked like I don't know where they thought they were going, but it made me feel like the meeting wasn't important. That for that person, he was all disshuffled and he didn't look like he was ready for any kind of meeting. So I know that I love Zoom because from the waist down, I can have on jeans, but from the waist up, you can put on a t-shirt and just put a jacket on. Just looking like you're really wanting to be engaged with that individual and making the Zoom call more professional. It doesn't have to be that way with your virtual dinners and all of that, but if you're conducting a meeting, conduct a meeting and make it look like a meeting.
All right, and one other question just popped in. It was our last question, so let me ask this one. Anonymous attendee is asking this question. Okay. What are some ways to empower the laity to do more within the community other than just phone calls? What kinds of things could be more meaningful for laity to engage in this time of kind of social distancing?
I would love to see some of our laity actually go out if you're able, because I know some people are not able. If you have compromised immune systems and all of that, you can use your a mask, and some of us are going out. But doing those drive-bys where you're going by and visiting with somebody from the curb, and you know, that's 6 to 10 feet. They have said that it's almost impossible. It doesn't mean it's not possible to get COVID-19, but people need to see people, you know, and that's what I've been doing, is just driving by some of our older congregation members and just waving to them, because I know I'll call them ahead of time and say, I'm just going to drive by and say hello. That's one. Putting together kits for people if you're a puzzle person or something for those individuals who you know cannot get out and need things in their home. Going grocery shopping. I have you all know, a millennial daughter, so she's been doing grocery runs for me so that I can take groceries to some of our congregation members, as well as some of my patients who cannot get out of their home. So just any of those kinds of things that are, we had a virtual birthday party for somebody where a group of us went to their house and we had balloons outside of their house and sang happy birthday to them. So it wasn't via Zoom, it was right there. So just any of those kinds of things that you can think of that where you can run errands for people. I know a lot of seniors need folks to go to pharmacies and pick up their prescriptions for them. So, you know, checking in and maybe starting a errand run or a pharmacy run tree where people can say, I need my pharmacy picked up, and you have a group of people that can do that. So any of those kinds of things that can support people staying in the home and you know, staying safe for those elders that cannot come out.
Excellent, excellent. I see some good comments on the side. So as Michelle's talking, I'd encourage all of you participating to read those comments in the chat. People are typing in some of the practices they're doing as well. So there's some good pieces to pick up there. So I want to give Michelle a round of virtual applause. Again, thank you, Michelle, for leading us today and providing some direction for us as we try to build partnerships between clergy and laity. I'm going to invite our Director of Communications, Selby Ewing, to come and join us, and she is going to lead us as we finish up this afternoon.
Well, I just want to say right now that I appreciate my sister Michelle and the wonderful, wonderful job she has done this afternoon, and really covering a very broad spectrum of how laity and clergy can work together to really stimulate local church energy and effectiveness. And really, as we all know, that the activity of church is local. And that extrapolates to global, but it's that work in the grassroots. And I think Michelle did a fantastic job coming to us with just so many suggestions. I will say, before I introduce our very special guest, that we will be conducting these Wednesday webinars every Wednesday, and you can go, Craig showed you where to go on the California Nevada website, and to preview, to watch these recordings. And so I'm just excited. I'm jumping the gun a little bit. I'm hoping, I'm looking, and I'm thinking that we might be ready for our special guest, but I'm looking for a clue from our tech staff. Oh, there we go. So it's my pleasure, it is my extreme pleasure to introduce our bishop, Minerva Carcano, who has been with us the whole time and who is indeed a wonderful partner with Michelle and with all of the clergy and lay leaders in the conference. And Bishop, I'm going to bow out and just invite you to do what you do best and contribute to everything you've heard.
Thank you. Am I being heard? I just want to make sure.
Yes, you are.
Thank you so much. It's wonderful to be with all of you. It's a special blessing to be with our conference lay leader, Michelle Pope. She has indeed been an incredible partner as I've come to serve as the Bishop of the California Nevada Conference and Journey in Ministry with all of you. I remember the first time I met her, and there was a kindred spirit immediately that bonded us together, because we both are so desirous of growing spiritually. And we prayed together that first time that we met. We laughed and we got to know one another. And it's been just a wonderful journey all the way through. She reminded me of so many things as she spoke. I've made a list of things that she brought to my mind. But I do want to start by saying that she's right, that we immediately begin to set up monthly meetings when I came 4 years ago, and we were pretty good at it for a long time. More recently, because of everything that's been happening in our denomination with special general conference, delayed general conference, all of that, our schedule got a little turned upside down. And I will say that one of the changes of this period of COVID-19 is that before we would meet and she would come to my office. She was so sensitive to my full calendar, and she would come to my office and we'd meet for a couple of hours, and then we'd look at the next month and go from there. I'm so grateful for that kind of lay support. It really has been incredible lay support to me to have her come. But with the COVID virus, we've been meeting every week because we can just connect for an hour and catch up and share. You know, friends, many of you who are in the laity, it's been our conference lay leader, Michelle Pope, who has brought your name, your gifts, your abilities to my attention. As she visits and does work with the laity, she gets to know you much sooner, much quicker than I do. That's a tremendous help to me. And I know that that can happen in local churches as well. You, the laity, can bring to the attention of your pastor people that you hear are wanting to do more, have a desire to be more engaged. Maybe you learn about their gifts, their skills, their talents. Clergy, sometimes we don't get to see all of that, hear all of that, come to know all of that. And so you can be, like Sister Michelle has been for me, a person who can connect other laity with the pastor. And things can happen. I will tell you that when the laity reach out in that way, things can happen. I was reminded when we moved back from 4 districts to 5 districts, it was the work of the district superintendents and myself. We had that particular responsibility by discipline, and we really struggled with the names of the districts. And we weren't quite pleased with all of the names. At least one of them was a little troubling because it was a bit different. But we had to go to annual conference. Time was up and we went to annual conference. We gave our report. You friends at annual conference, which by the way, is a body that's half clergy and half laity, because that's our understanding of how the church works. We're in partnership together. But we went and you approved it. You said, yes, this will help our ministry in the California and Nevada conference. About a month later, I received a letter from the United Methodist Women of our annual conference. It was a well done letter. It was very gracious, but they said, there's one district that has the wrong name, and gave me all the reasons and suggested a name. And I was pleased with the letter. I thought that's what we needed. Took it back to the appointive cabinet and we all celebrated. That's how the Los Rios district got its name, a partnership between strong lay women, myself and the cabinet. So thank you, United Methodist Women, for that gift. Holy Week last week, Sister Michelle and I did a Good Friday service together. It was a real blessing. It was a lot of work. I had to learn so much about technology. She's a whiz, but I really had to learn. But the reason we did that was because lay people in particular have been saying to us, much of it I've heard through our Sister Michelle, we need to see you both more. We need to hear you more in this time of isolation. We love our pastors, but we also want to hear from our bishop, and we want to hear from our conference lay leader. So we were trying to be sensitive and responsive, and so we did that Good Friday service. I thank you for that nudge. I've been asking our cabinet members, district superintendents, executive staff members, so what do we do next? What is it that now post Holy Week, but still in the Easter season, looking towards Pentecost, what can we do as the clergy in our positions? myself as your bishop, our district superintendents, and other clergy on staff at the conference level, we want to do that which is responsive to what our local churches need. We don't want to duplicate what you're doing. We certainly don't want to undermine what you're doing. We want to augment and support you and help you and be present for you. So I would be thrilled if you would let Sister Michelle or myself know what it is that you think we need to be doing next that would undergird and augment your work and enable us to be present for you and with you. There's so much that our laity can help us do and see in this time when we are sheltered in place. One of the ways that laity can really partner with pastors right now and pastors with laity is that because we're sheltered in place, we really need to be in communication with one another and ask the question that I often ask Sister Michelle, and she asks me as well. So what are you hearing? What are you seeing? What are the spiritual needs of not only our churches, but our communities? Where are those places of human hurt in our community right now in the midst of COVID-19 that we as a church could be taking on for the glory of God and as a response to people's need for healing, for mercy, and for grace? Do you know that the laity and the clergy of our Bay District, those in the San Francisco area, in the city of San Francisco to be precise, they wanted to respond to how to care for the homeless right now. Homeless people, brothers and sisters, are so vulnerable. They can easily pick up COVID-19. They have no place to go and quarantine themselves. They have no real way to get the care and support that they need. And so our governor did an amazing job. The governor in California did an amazing job of finding some federal funds to be able to start a room key initiative, which means that they went out, he and his staff went out and found hotels that said, we've got empty rooms. Nobody's traveling. Everybody's canceled. We've got empty hotel rooms. We can provide rooms for the homeless. We need some funds to do that. And so that happened. And our United Methodist laity and clergy in San Francisco said, we need to help with that. And through their work with their Extension Society in San Francisco, soon to become a district union, they were able to pull out $100,000, becoming the first church, the first denomination in all of California, as far as we know, to bring money to the table and say, we are committed to finding adequate housing for the homeless in San Francisco in this day and age. Isn't that amazing? It was laity and clergy working together. The district superintendent could not have done it alone. She and the clergy serving in San Francisco could not have done it alone. It took clergy and laity working together. And you know what I've been thinking? I've been thinking that if we can do it in the midst of the COVID-19 crisis, pandemic, if we can figure out a way to care for the homeless now, I think we can figure it out tomorrow and post-COVID-19 through all the learnings that are coming our way through this experience. You, the laity, have so much to share with us, the clergy, about what you're seeing, what you're hearing, so that together we can figure out a way to be agents of God's mercy and compassion and justice for our churches, for our church people, but also for our communities. Today we learned that the governor of California has committed $75 million to help workers, immigrants, undocumented immigrants as well. As the church, we'll need to collaborate as laity and clergy on how to get that good word out and how to become those communities of faith that make it happen, that assist people so that they can receive the kind of help that they need. There's so many opportunities. Do you know that we've been given as church people a little bit of a recognition as people who are doing essential work? And it's because our government, our state governments, local governments, county governments have seen that we do step up to serve the community. And so let's keep doing that. And it happens because of clergy lay relationships and that active work that we do together. I love praying with my sister Michelle. We're on the phone and we pray aloud. I pray aloud and she prays aloud. We pray for all of you. It's great to be in partnership with you. God bless you all.
Thank you, Bishop, for being with us today. Selby, do you have other things you want to add before we close?
Well, I just think anything I would add would pale in comparison to the messages from Michelle and from Bishop. So I would just say thank you so much for being with us, everyone who's taken the time to do this. You know, we have the website and we have the web page for the webinar. So all the housekeeping that we would mention here is already listed. And I don't want to dilute this moment of wonderful sharing by, you know, getting into the logistics of all that kind of thing. So you can contact me on my email is selvye@calnevumc. It's on the website. So let's just leave it at that. And I would just say a big thank you to everyone who took time to join us in this season of Easter, in this odd time. And I would extend the greatest thank you to our lay leader, Michelle.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thank you.
Who is just, you know, all that. And I would also thank, of course, our Episcopal leader, Bishop Carcano, who out of her day chose, as you chose, to be here. So I would just humbly remind us that our life is a series of choices that string together. And I am so thankful to be a part of this family and appreciate your being here with us. Craig, anything else?
No, I think everything is there. Next week, we're going to be talking about how to do stewardship online, which is a big challenge for a lot of us. And we have a very special guest next week, the Reverend Ani Missirian Wilson from Modesto First UMC will be leading us next week. So we're looking forward to hearing from her. So everyone, thanks for joining us this week. Again, thanks to Bishop Carcano. Thank you to Michelle Pope for this time together. We look forward to seeing all of you next Wednesday. God bless and be well in God's Spirit.